What do the faces of human trafficking look like? Are they the anonymous children, sexually exploited by the very adults who they were supposed to trust?
Are they the foreign-tongued worker, hidden away by the bonds of slavery behind closed doors?
Are they the teenage runaway, roaming between abandoned buildings at street corners and traffic lights?
Are they the foster kids,
Bouncing from home to home?
abused by caretakers,
Are they girls, boys?
women and men?
There are all those faces, all of our faces.
I am the face of human trafficking.
When Tamia came to Canada from her native Hungary 11 years ago, she had high hopes of making money working as a domestic. Her problems began with immigration.
Why are you coming to Canada? And I said, you know, babysitting, domestic, this and that. And then hours later, the guy says, the problem is that your story doesn't match with your contract. And that was the first time that I heard that I'm here to do exotic dancing. And I signed the contract, but it was in English, so I didn't really, and they didn't really believe it at the time, so that's what greeted me. But very long story short, they let me go, and these Hungarian people and some guy picked me up from the airport.
From then on, she was a slave, forced to work as a stripper and prostitute to pay off her debt.
The people in the clubs, do you think they realized what was going on in your life? Do you think they had any idea?
No. Besides that, I was 89 pounds and looked pretty sick, I think. I was smiling all the time. I was smiling because if I don't smile, I don't make money. If I don't make money, I get in trouble.
And no one would know her story today had she not finally come forward. That's the problem, according to this undercover police officer.
We know there's victims out there, but obviously if they're not willing to talk, we can't do anything. We know what this guy's doing or this trafficker's doing. We need them to come forward. And to do that, we have to break that wall that the trafficker pimp has built. We have an 18-year-old girl from
It's a wall that is meticulously constructed and protected, not with chains, but control.
What's the motivation?
Money. It's always money. Money for the trafficker, and it's very lucrative.
The UN estimates profits from human trafficking at $32 billion a year, the majority coming from sex slavery.
If I see the word young 18 or 19-year-old girl or whatever it is.
And while most Canadians think trafficking happens elsewhere, this detective says it's in our own backyard and easier to access than ever, thanks to the internet.
Just the same way the trafficker or the pimp uses that to you know, sell sex, I'm using it as an investigative tool to find them. And at any given day, you could go on there and you could see it by the hundreds. It's newspaper ads, it's you know, in our massage parlors, it's in our strip clubs, it's everywhere. I would be safe to say there's not an adult entertainment establishment in the region of Peel that does not have a victim of human trafficking in it.
Does she have a jacket?
She doesn't even have a jacket.
Police work is not just getting into the mind of the predator, but the prey. And that's why Tamia is walking alongside them, giving them insight into the journey of a victim and why it's so difficult to come forward. Once they do, the police can bring perpetrators to justice. What they aren't able to do is help the victims get back to life.
They come with us, they give us their statement, they tell us their little life story, and at the end of the interview, they're looking at you across the table and saying, well, now what do I do? And that's their biggest fear.
That's when people like Naomi Baker get involved.
When you hear their stories of why they decided to do what they're doing and how they got trapped and how they got literally brainwashed and coerced, the stories are endless and everyone rips your heart out every time you hear it.
Baker founded Canada Fights Human Trafficking, a national organization that not only finds safe houses for victims, but attempts to raise awareness of the issue. She says most victims are Canadian citizens, the majority of whom are Aboriginal girls and women. The problem is it's a difficult crime to track and quantify, though Canada Fights Human Trafficking is overwhelmed with demands.
Canada is being inundated with people trafficking children specifically because we let them. The average sentence right now in Canada is 2.5 months. That is unacceptable. It's one thing to be a nation of mercy, but what is mercy without justice?
It's that question that prompted Winnipeg MP Joy Smith's fight. one that started close to home.
When I was a member of the Manitoba Legislature, my son was in the Integrated Child Exploitation Unit, and his hair turned gray in less than 2 years.
She soon found out why.
Once I started working with the victims, I feel that the police officers and the on-the-ground people, the NGOs who work with these victims, are the real heroes in this country. And I think as a parliamentarian, it's very, very necessary that Canadians are aware and know how to protect their children.
Protecting is one thing, prosecuting the crime is another. Canada's first convicted child human trafficker received a 3-year sentence for selling 2 girls aged 15 and 14. And a recent RCMP report found, despite a high incidence of the crime, only 36 cases of human trafficking made it to court. It's those kind of numbers that motivated Smith to do something about it.
If my bill passes through the Senate, we will have mandatory minimums of 5 years for people who sell children, 18 years and under. And if they rape them or do that kind of thing to them, they will get 6 years. Now that hurts me because I'd like them to have 96 years, but I would have had a court challenge. So I've had to very carefully construct that law so it wouldn't get a court challenge and that it would pass.
The good news is Bill C-268 is now law, and the government has since launched 2 national campaigns to raise awareness of human trafficking in Canada, specifically how to spot potential victims. The bad news is, despite the prevalence of this crime, there are few, if any, convictions.
Human trafficking is a growing problem in Canada, with girls being lured into the sex trade before they're old enough to enter high school. Now, an initiative by the Calgary Police Service is trying to get the upper hand on this modern-day slavery. As Jill Croteau tells us in the first of her exclusive 2-part series, cops are posing as recruiters in an effort to keep these young women safe.
They are kept hidden, held captive, forced to satisfy strangers. It's a dirty secret. But the flesh trade is finding a home in this country.
Natalie, I just got into town and I'm looking for some company.
Human trafficking is a very real and a very uncomfortable truth.
I don't know anything more dangerous than what we're doing here.
Undercover detectives in Calgary spend night after night recruiting girls to hotel rooms.
Hi Dahlia, how are you?
I'm good, you?
Good, you busy tonight?
The intent isn't to arrest them, but to protect them.
It's like showing them that there are other doors that they can open outside of the hotel rooms.
And sometimes that means reminding them what's at risk.
So heaven forbid anything ever happened to you, who would you notify?
There's no sugarcoating it, there's no glamorizing it. You have a victim and an individual that cares nothing about this person other than the fact that at the end of the day, you need to bring me money.
Traffickers have the kind of greed that cannot be satisfied. They earn on average $280,000 from each victim under their control. They rarely earn enough to buy their own freedom.
You can't leave and you can't stop if you wanted to. There's a deadline. You know what I mean? It's like 50 G's, then another 50 more.
We got Jenna, 24, Sasha, open-minded.
The exploitation has gone even deeper underground.
New to the business, new to the city, 19 years of age, red flag.
Images clog the internet. Streams of ads drive authorities to search for underage girls, those being held against their will. Most end up on Vancouver's downtown east side.
It's not as well known as it should be.
Police forces across the country work relentlessly to track the transfer of these women from province to province.
It's as tawdry as a Hollywood screenplay, but it actually happens. People come from the countryside, so to speak, into the bright lights of the city.
Being bought and sold on these streets is without question horrible. But imagine being a parent walking these very same streets, searching for your lost child, knowing the heartbreaking possibility they may never be coming home.
My daughter was only 13. I didn't think that ever happened in our community.
Diane's daughter was lured into the trade. Nearly 2 decades later, she is still trapped on the streets of Vancouver.
I used to go down and go into some of the crack houses and into the trick pads, and I would offer people cigarettes to let me know where she was so I could find her.
And because she's living it, she helps other families, giving them support and guidance, helping them search for their children.
I'm doing what I wish someone had done for my family and my daughter. As long as she's alive, there's hope, and that's what you hold on to.
Those in the business of giving them a sanctuary say it's tough to know the true scope of how big this issue is. Few ever come forward.
They're making their money off of somebody else's body, somebody else that they have frightened, scared, threatened, beaten into submission.
And it's something that can no longer be ignored.
There is a brilliant opportunity for all of us now to start educating people across Canada about this issue in particular.
Young women who lost their innocence as sex trade workers are sharing their stories. They want to save others from the streets and bring awareness to the human trafficking problem right here in our own backyard. Here's Jill Croteau.
It is war, and this is their battlefield, the place where they confront their enemies every night. An ugly existence they were manipulated into.
So we were like little bunnies, fresh meat. We were like prey to every pedophile pimp, and they were just waiting for us.
Barely in her teens, she was recruited.
And at 14 years old, kids are putting on makeup, they're going to the mall, they're doing these kinds of things, and I am being groomed by two young girls who are being prostituted.
And so began a very dark slide.
I did meet this guy the next day in Calgary's Chinatown. The first guy that I had ever serviced, he had rotten teeth, gold teeth, no teeth, smelt like grease, he had dandruff in his hair. I mean, now you keep in mind, I'm a kid from the suburbs, lived a very privileged life. 1 year later, my life has drastically changed. I'm an addict above this Chinese restaurant, about to service a stranger.
But their uncomfortable stories help give a voice to an ever-growing reality.
If we can just believe this is something that happens in other people's backyards, then we don't have to look at what's my role in this, right? And it just seems easier to think it's somebody else's problem.
But the problem has swelled into a $32 billion industry, more profits than Nike, Google, and Starbucks combined. Recent changes have been made to the criminal code, amendments that include specific child trafficking charges, giving authorities more power to prosecute.
For me, it runs close to home. I kind of know the end result of human trafficking.
After being sold into the sex trade, Angel's mom was murdered by notorious BC serial killer Robert Pickton.
And finally, the cold, brutal truth came knocking at the door, which was a police officer. They decided to tell me that your mother's jawbone was found in a pigsty.
A disturbing number of Aboriginal women get trapped in the trade, forced into a dark underworld, losing sight of reality.
I was about 11, 12.
They no longer want to be shamed into silence.
Do I want to live the rest of my life knowing that there's other little kids out there that are being scooped up, that are losing their innocence, that are losing their path? Not only that, but being killed, who have gone missing? How many women have gone missing and nobody talks about it? Why are we going to turn a blind eye?
Because they see themselves in these young women, they speak out, so they have the will to escape. Jill Croteau, Global News.